Very good. Can you hear me okay, Heather?
I can hear you loud and clear.
All right. Well, thanks again. My name is Jeff Stone. I'm the ongoing support director. We call it Merit Care at Merit Solutions. And thanks for the intro, Heather. Yeah, just trying to take what I've learned over the years, pass it on a little bit. Definitely not a trained presenter or anything like that, but just trying to get some dialogue going, share some of the findings that we've seen over the years with troubled implementations that we've helped to get back on track. And that's really what I've tried to put together here is this session. It's something we did at the summit and had some good feedback. So I've split it up a little bit, trying to put it into a bunch of small sessions where we can hit on a couple topics at a time. Heather can grab a couple notes, and I'll encourage you all to chat if there's any questions that you have. We'll have some time at the end to go through them, or to even help craft this webinar as we go. I'll show you here real quick the framework of this webinar. So today is really, what is your AX house made out of? Trying to help you to assess your own system, figure out what the pain points are. But then what we'll do in the coming weeks is I'll have folks from my team join me, and we'll drill into each of these areas that we've identified as the 10 main building blocks. So we have the accessibility and training, making sure users are prepared to work in the system. We have performance and maintenance, which is always a big one. We could probably do 8 sessions on that, but we'll have some of the most common troubleshooting techniques that we'll refer to. Efficiency, flexibility, you can see here outputs, integrations, support and direction, which is near and dear to me. And then the last couple sessions are really how we've put together a process to help turn around those troubled implementations and get them back on track. We call it our WISE method with, you can see, recognize, organize, stabilize, and then get to the point of optimizing, maximizing, and kind of realizing the return on investment you're looking for in AX. So that's kind of what's in store. Today will be a little bit more conceptual, kind of project management aspects and setting the tone. And like I said, definitely looking for some comments and chats, and I'll take those into consideration as we finish crafting these remaining sessions. Okay, so where does this analogy come from? I'll say that when I was starting to look at how to do this at UG, this is a story I was reading to my kids at night, and it hit home. Okay, yeah, what the 3 little pigs, and trying to look at that as far as an AX implementation and how you can do it quickly. You can make your house of straw, but it's going to get blown over, right? If you actually take your time and build it out of the bricks and think about those having that strong foundation, that's when everyone lives happily ever after. And to take it a step further, the huffing and puffing. Those are our users, our stakeholders, vendors, customers, when things aren't going as we like. So there's a little bit more to it than that, but that's kind of what I was hoping you'd keep in mind. And again, today the focus is really to understand where you stand today, what is your house made out of currently, and trying to work to make sure that the expectations are aligned with the resources, the time you're actually putting into this. We've seen quite a few folks where the project goals were well defined, the expectations were there for things to happen, but and we'll talk about this a little bit later, people didn't have the right budget of time to put into it. They're spread too thin, or we didn't have the right partner that you're working with on things. So there's a lot of different factors we'll talk about today, but that's kind of the goal today, is to really figure out how to assess your situation, and then we'll get into the specifics of those building blocks in the coming weeks. I like to start with this on pretty much any presentation I do about AX or any ERP system, which is, there's going to be tough times no matter who your partner is, no matter how much you've planned. And a lot of times your state of mind about how bad things are is directly related to where you are in the implementation. And I actually have another slide that overlays this, but I didn't include it. But basically at the beginning you have this, some people call it uninformed optimism, where everything's going to be great and you're doing well, and you start to look in things and say, yeah, this is going to be great. And then down the bottom of that curve is probably right around your, I almost said some words I shouldn't say, but the oh no moments where the upgrade is, or the install is about to happen and everyone's freaking out. And then, you get through it, you work through it. And I will say there are times where in that bottom depression area, there are people that check out as well. So that's an important area. So if you're getting ready to go live, if you're getting ready to go through an upgrade and you're struggling, that's a really important area to make sure you have that buy-in and you have that motivation in place for your users. So yeah, when I'm talking about grief, I'm talking about the second definition, nothing to be, deep sorrow, although some people will equate it to that. Really talking more about the troubles, the annoyances. Let's see, so how to minimize that? Obviously, it's making sure those expectations are aligned, like as I said. I think back to an example recently where we did a SQL Server upgrade for a client, and they had 24/7 manufacturing around the clock, and they were trying to minimize downtime. And from my perspective, everything went well. I talked to my guys; they're using words like flawless, and they had this small window of time where we got everything done, copied over how many gigs of data. And so a couple days later, I am talking to the director of that company, thinking this is a good time to talk about some other products we've had. He's going to be happy. And he harps on one small miss we had the first day that was resolved in like a half hour, like some interface that didn't have the right permissions. And I won't use the word audacity, but the misalignment of our expectations on something so big being perfect was I guess, the problem on my end. We didn't have the right communication along the way, and even though we had told him things were going well, he was expecting perfection, and that's fine. You should, if he wants to expect that, and we should be working towards that. But had we, shared a little bit more that, hey, this is a pretty risky thing we're doing, and it's pretty big, and here's all the contingency plans we have in place, and how we're going to back it up, and what our fallback plan is, and we're going to make sure that you don't have any problems, but it's going to take a lot of work. That would have went a long way on managing the outcome and having everybody be on the same page at the end of it. Kind of going into the same thing, being focused on the big picture is huge, and celebrating wins along the way. So on that same topic, what are the biggest challenges? When I started off the session in Summit, I actually handed out something to everybody and said, what are the biggest reasons why you're here today, looking for improvements on your system? What are the things that you're finding? And this is definitely an area, if you want to start typing stuff into a chat right now, we'll reflect on it at the end. But the biggest things that everyone said is, we didn't have the right team in place, or the right planning, or the requirements were not clear enough. It kind of comes down to those three things. Requirements might be that they were there, but scope creep came in and they couldn't keep to what was the original requirements, or it could just be that things were not defined clearly enough, which I'll show in a minute. One kind of point that we keep harping on when we have new implementations, or even we're helping to help folks out, is you have to at least explore all of the exception cases, and that's where we kind of get into the planning and requirements. We see a lot of times that people think about that 80-20 rule, like, well, we think this is going to work, and we've tested the happy case, the happy trail. We can post an invoice, all right. But how do you, back out that invoice when it's already been paid and received, and there's some other variations of it, and you may not have all those answers to go live with the most efficient way possible, but it can't be something that cripples your system when it occurs. And we found that that's really one of the biggest issues, is people just hadn't thought about those exception cases before they went live. And we've actually had quite a few companies that have reached out to us and said, we're going live next week. We are not confident, and can you, be there for some secondary support or end up becoming our ongoing support? And that's one of the first things we'll do, is we'll come in there and we'll assess what are the processes that were missed, or that are going to be challenges, and let's at least talk through the backup plans, even if it's manual, beforehand. As far as the team strengths, I mean, yes, you need to have a good partner. You need to have smart people internally that are the experts in the area. But the big thing is that this can't, any AX support or any AX improvement initiatives you have, or even just the ongoing, maintenance of the system, it's important to have stakeholders in this that have a say. That it's great to have end users that are, but if we can also have the middle managers, if you will, the folks that can see the division of the company and also the challenges that the front line is having. That's kind of your ideal team to be involved, not only in the implementation, but ongoing when you're trying to assess new modifications and prioritize and work through issues together. So that's kind of what I was getting at there. The plan doesn't have to be a known perfect plan to start. I think about this last spring and summer when we were working with Microsoft Azure for the first couple times, getting these high availability environments up and going. That was not an easy thing that had been done by a lot of people many times. So we worked closely with Microsoft, and it comes back to those plans and the communications, just letting our client know that we were, in some ways going through some trial and error, but we were confident and we had contingency plans in place, and we had experts involved that were committed to making it happen. So a lot of it, again, managing those expectations and making sure you have the clear requirements. Okay, so specifically, what is your house made of? How do you assess it? So here's my my animal house scene, which couldn't be your house. It's a house, right? It may not be safe, stable, organized, inviting, but it is a house. That's in some ways what you see at go live time is we're just going to get through it, and then we're going to do what we can in phase 2, phase 3. A lot of this is what we'll cover in the later sessions of the webinar, what we call the get whys, how to reorganize and stabilize. But what I want to go through is here, this is one of the things you need to be looking at, whether you're a user of the system or a IT manager or whatever your role is. How are, sometimes you get blinded by getting live and then you go back to some of these things, but there's some major challenges if you're not safe and stable. Do you have the right compliant user roles in place? A big thing we see a lot is that people will go live with or do their testing with, everyone's a sysadmin, and then they start to go live and say, well, I guess we should probably put proper security in place. And just that struggle of trying to pick the right roles and make sure people have what they need, or that you have the right mitigations identified if you know you're going to be out of compliance. That's an important part of the project and definitely ongoing. So that's one of the things we would do, or that I suggest you work with your partners to make sure that, hey, where do we stand as far as, are we in compliance? Do our licenses match up with what we're telling Microsoft? Do we have the right firewalls in place in our Azure environment? Do we have the right backups and SQL maintenance plans in place? So those are the types of things that, if you're not asking your partner about those, if you've been focused on the functional, definitely, if you're not managing it internally, even if you are, I would say ask your partner for best practices on those areas. Make sure you're being proactive on some of those things. And then obviously, are your critical processes working most of the time without challenges? If you're, and again, this kind of refers to whether you're going to be ready to go live or not, but we found that you have to have, I'd say 95% even of those cases identified and working okay, because the time you spend on those exceptions, if you haven't thought through them, will really not only frustrate people, but can bring things to a halt at times in a manufacturing environment, things like that. The organization aspect of it, just again, this is assessing, seeing where you stand today. So I'm not going to be sharing anything too earth-shattering, but do you have your user documentation available? Is it updated? Or do you have policies that you should update it along with every release before that code goes to production, which is something we try to promote. We have a lot of times where we fix something or we make an enhancement and the users say it's ready, put it in production, and we have to kind of say, well, first of all, let's schedule this in a release and not just throw things into production whenever they're ready, unless it's critical. But also, have you communicated this change to everybody? Have you updated your documentation? So making sure you have those, I will say, processes in place. Change management and review board. How are you going to determine which changes to make? Do you have a process or a sounding board that where team leaders from different areas of the company can all hear together what changes are being asked for, so that somebody doesn't make a change that impacts another group negatively downstream? So those are the types of organization aspects that we try to make sure is in place. before you're going live, ideally, or at least once you're into the operations mode. And just having that feeling of organization, even if there are a lot of problems, having that organized method to report them, prioritize them, will go a long way with the sanity of your user base. Part of this also organization is around accessibility in environments and having good test environments, things like that. Refreshing your environments and how you can even automate that. So we'll talk about that a lot. I think that's in the next course or the next webinar. And then finally, how accommodating is your home? Do your users enjoy working in AX? And I know enjoy is a relative word when working is involved, but how efficient is it for them? How flexible is it? Do they understand how to navigate through the system and set up favorites and get the data out that they need to? So that's one of the things that you go through these projects and you have this huge to-do list and you have all these phase 2 items and minor low priority things that never get worked on. But one thing that we've tried to do, or we encourage users and their partners to do, is take some time to do a month of minor improvements. It's all those little things that have added up on the list that you know you're never going to get to. You got to get to them at some point to keep the users happy, and you'd be amazed that some of the smallest things that have been on the to-do list for a year, you knock out a few of those, and usually they're low risk. They're maybe they're not the biggest return on investment as far as directly, but that's how you keep the users engaged. That's how you build the rapport and get them with the momentum needed to work on the bigger, harder things that take months at a time. So that's kind of a tip that we like to do is focus on those minor improvement. We'll call it a project, but it's really a collection of smaller things. So again, something to take back to your partner or to try to run with it yourself as a user to get some traction on the little things and build momentum. Find those quick wins, because there are a lot of bigger projects, especially if you have a whole additional modules you're waiting to implement, that can suck up a lot of time and resources. So having those small wins along the way is what we try to promote. Okay, so what does success look like? You can read through this quickly, but basically it's what we talked about earlier. What do clear requirements look like? And how do you make these this vision that somebody has, or that hopefully you all have shared in your organization, how do you make that the guideline for your decisions? I talked a little bit about return on investment, and we try to push for that too, and we encourage you to, before you make any change, talk through it with the bigger group of team leads, and really try to push each other to quantify. This thing is going to take 40 hours of work. What are we going to get out of it? So that and is it in line with our long-term goals? If you're going to be moving to AX7 and they're not going to have as much of an emphasis on enterprise portal or something like that, cubes, then maybe you're not going to make huge investments in that this year. So that's kind of having that vision in place would help you to make those decisions. And these are just some examples of we want access to current data. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that every day at 8 a.m. someone should be able to see all the posted GL transactions from the previous day, and use them in their corporate reporting tool. Oh yeah, and we also wanted to connect to all the corresponding AP and AR transactions, so a little bit more than the the cube might allow for, whatever it might be. What does going live mean? That's one that's always fun, because there's phases and dates, and you go live, but then you still have to close your books in the legacy system, and then there's another data migration of GL a month later. So these are things where we've found them as traps, where people think, oh, hey, we're live. Well, we're live but this or but this. And all goes back to managing the expectations. Make sure that these are known topics and you're not hiding them, and everyone is aware that, hey, going live really means this, and there's still work to be done. And then celebrate once you've done each of those little pieces. Okay, last couple of things on what does success look like. I think we've talked about this. Having that strong team, not just executives or the maybe frontline doers, but people in the middle as well. People that can have authority to make decisions. Now, as much as I said that you want to cover all those exception cases, we also try to say that, when you're feeling about 90% sure of a decision, let's go with it and see what happens. When you're configuring something new in a test environment, you can, what do they say? Paralysis by analysis. I mean, there's so many options and different ways to do things in AX. MRP configurations and planning fence lead times, and I mean, you can look at each of the individual setting for weeks. So what we try to do is, tell folks, if you're confident that this is your gut instinct, or this is what you think we're going to do, let's go with it. Let's try the test environment. Let's not, analyze every possible repercussion, unless it's an area where it's going to have a lot of impact downstream. So if you're talking about, should we do weighted average cost, or should we do moving average or standard? Yeah, let's take the time to discuss that one thoroughly. Or if you're going to backflush your materials or issue unpick lists up front, those are things that are worth the discussion up front, right? And vet that out. But if you're trying to decide on, how many days your planning fence time should be, pick 60 and go with it. And let's see what comes out when you start running MRP and looking at your planned orders. So that's, kind of I would say I won't say best practice, but just a tip along the way is when you're trying new things, especially in those test environments, there's so much out there that people aren't using, and you're not going to really understand all the different touch points until you start playing with it anyway. So we do try to say, if you're feeling good about it 90% of the way there, let's start playing with it. All right, so I talked a little bit at the beginning. So this was the 10 bricks, building blocks that we came up with when trying to really say, going into a deeper picture of where do you stand. And that's what I want to get into the next seminars, is we're going to spend the whole 20-30 minutes talking about what does it mean to have good accessibility and training performance. So we'll get into some exact tools you can use, some benchmarks that we've seen before at other clients to say, hey, what did your performance look like? But what I wanted to point out today is that these are all important, and you're each going to have different focuses. So I'm anxious to hear which of these you feel are the most important. But even if you say, what, I think, as long as our system is up and going, we have good performance, and we're getting the outputs we need, then we're fine. Maybe, but if you don't have a direction of what's coming next, you don't have support that you need, then you're only fine for so long. Or if you have all the outputs coming out, but you haven't been doing anything maintenance-wise, sooner or later you're going to be hurting. So that's really the idea of the rest of these webinar sessions, is to explore these in depth. The other thing I want to point out is maybe it's your people that make you good in one area or not. So we've seen many times where you are working with a great consultant, or you have a great internal analyst, and they are the reason why you feel like you have the training you need and the maintenance and the flexibility and support. They're doing a lot of stuff for you, but there's no one else that knows it, and that's a huge risk. So think about it that way as well as you're looking at these, trying to figure out on your own, do we have the right, are we efficient in our processes? Think about why that is or why that isn't, and if it is because of a single resource that's a superstar that got you through everything, maybe you're not trained quite as well as you think you are. So in the coming session, some of this will be more technical. Definitely, a lot of it will be more technical around the performance, the maintenance, outputs. We'll talk about MR, cubes, some of the integration methods, performance and troubleshooting techniques. The support and direction is mostly on the procedural functional side, but there's some ongoing support, metrics and things like that we'll talk about a little bit. I think those are the majority of what I wanted to cover today as we kind of get this kicked off. As I mentioned, this is something new for me as well, so we'll definitely adapt this a little bit. But I wanted to see, what other reasons you feel that implementation struggle, what building blocks you think need the most attention, and anything else you think that might be helpful to be covered as we explore each of these. If you have specific problems you're facing, we can try to address those in the sessions, or if there's any specific questions you have about best practices, definitely try to incorporate those beforehand.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah, so I will gladly, if you want to raise your hand, I'll gladly unmute you if you want to address some of those last bullets that Jeff had included there. And I'm sure if there are any questions, you can post that as well. I can tell you in just working with the users in the community, one of the biggest things that they say makes their implementation struggle is because they don't do a good marrying up of a project manager from the partner to, to the customer. So in other words, if you're implementing in a customer that is focused on agriculture, don't send someone that's really well versed in, like retail or something like that. So I've heard that time and time again. So it's a good suggestion. Kind of treat it like a marriage. Pick someone that can improve your areas of need, right?
Definitely.
And I don't have any other questions or anything from any of our attendees, but Jeff has graciously given his contact information, so please feel free to reach out with him if there's something that comes about once you've shared this with others in your office or just revisited this. You may be attending this as a proactive move and you may not have implemented yet, and you never know when you get in the throes of things how things might come up and how you can relate to things and there are questions. So feel free to do that as well. You can post it where the recording lives because that's good that others can see that when they visit the recording in the future. So everybody will receive the link to today's presentation deck as well as the recording, and you'll get that right in your email, and it'll take just a couple of hours for you to get that. And again, like you said, this is a series, so feel free to go out to acseg.com. And when you click on Learn and Engage and then go up to the upcoming webinars, before you scroll through the list, just visit the tag that says Building Blocks. And if you click on that, it'll bring up all of the webinars that pertain to this series. And that's an easy way that you can register for all of them. All right, Jeff.